Good morning, everybody. This is Tatiana Bazzichelli from the Disruption Network Club. I'm very happy to introduce the conference Behind the Mask, Whistleblowing During the Pandemic. Together with me, there is also Lieke Ploeger, that is the co-director of the Disruption Network Club. And I want, first of all, to thank our great team, Elena Velanoska and Nada Baker, that work on the production, Jonas Franchi on the graphic, Alanna Travers on the communication, Claudia Trapp on the press, and we have the great Bowling Head streaming team that is taking care of the streaming today, and Lauren DeCarly that is writing our report. The Disruption Network Club is an organization that works at the intersection of society, technology, and politics. This is our 23rd conference that we have been preparing during this year. Normally, we do our conferences at the Kunstquartier Bethanien, but because of the pandemic, we decided to do it online, as you can see. So our interaction will be a bit limited for that, but we hope anyway to have our normal great conversations that we usually try to do at a global scale. This conference is focusing on the persecution suffered by whistleblowing during the pandemic and on the stories of the people that are trying to speak out about the coronavirus. At the same time, we are also trying to present new forms of collective care, of social justice and resistance to create and foster accountability and literacy on the discourse of the pandemic. And we all try with our work also to defend the human rights at a global scale. I want to welcome the audience as well that is following us online, and also I want to mention them that we have a chat. Please try to use it, try to send your thoughts, try to also share the work you are doing. Remember to ask questions to our speakers that we can bring to them towards the end of the panel. I'm now passing the word to my colleague and co-director of the Disruption Network Club, Lieke Ploeger, that is going to introduce the program of today and also thanks our funders.
The eternal mute button has to happen at least once every streaming conference. So welcome again. I'm just going to say a few brief words about the program of today, and then we will get started with the program. So first of all, we're going to start with an interview with AI Weiwei on his film Coronation. And for those of you in Germany, we will also be streaming this film for free online during the conference up until Sunday. So if you're interested to see the full film, you can sign up on our website and we will give you the access code to see the film. Then at 3:30, our time here in Germany, we will start with the first panel, which is called Defending the Truth in the Pandemic, Is Whistleblowing the Magic Wand? And for this panel, we will have with us Thuli Madonsela from Stellenbosch University, María de Los Ángeles Estrada from the Transparency and Anti-Corruption Initiative, and Stefano Fusco from Noi Denunceremo. And the panel will be moderated by Roberto Perez-Rocha of Transparency International. Then we have a short break, and we will come back at 6:30 with the keynote of today, Whistleblowing and COVID-19, telling the truth at the center of the crisis. And for this panel, we've invited two whistleblowers, Erika Chung, the Theranos whistleblower, and Eileen Chubb, who is a care industry whistleblower. And this panel will be moderated by Delphine Halgan of the Signals Network. So yeah, very exciting for a program for you today, and we're very happy to get started soon with the conference. But before we do, I also wanted to mention that we have, in addition to the conference, 2 community workshops happening. The first one is happening on Saturday, the 20th of March, so this weekend. And this workshop is called Get Your Numbers Straight, Making Sense of Health Data. And this workshop is led by Serena Tinari, who's also going to speak at one of the panels tomorrow. And she's an investigative journalist and is going to teach us in this workshop how you can develop a spider sense to spot red flags in public health communication and mainstream media reporting. And she'll be giving concrete examples of the COVID-19 times and also tips how you can avoid common pitfalls. So for this workshop, we still have a few final spots left, and you can sign up on our website if you're interested. So this will be this Saturday afternoon. And then next week, as a final event of this conference, we will have a workshop on the 27th of March with the Pirate Care Network about politicizing care, piracy, and biopolitics. And we will be learning more from them about piracy, the division of care labor, and also civil biodisobedience. So if you're interested to know more, of course, all the information is also on our website. And then finally, before getting started, of course, we want to thank our funders who made this event possible. First of all, the Senate Department for Culture in Europe here in Berlin that is supporting our program, the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, the Riva and David Logan Foundation, and the Checkpoint Charlie Foundation. And we're also supported in part by a grant from the Foundation Open Society Institute in cooperation with the OSIFA of the Open Society Foundations. And this event is also part of the European Reimagine Europe project, which is co-funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. And as I already said, the next panel will be moderated also by Roberto Perez-Rocha of Transparency International. And we're very happy that they are again one of our cooperation partners for this event. Also, we are doing this event in collaboration with the Signals Network and with Global Leaks. And we want to also thank especially our streaming partner, which is Boiling Head Media. And finally, also a big thanks to our media partners, which are this time the Berliner Zeitung, Taz, die Tageszeitung, Ex-Berliner, and Il Mitte. And finally, a thanks also to our outreach partner, Axioma.
Thank you very much, Lieke. Now we enter into the discourse of the first event of today. And I want to thank, first of all, Roberto Perez-Rocha for the moderation and for the cooperation with Transparency International. Actually, Roberto is the second time that he's moderating a panel with us. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to introduce you properly. Roberto is the director for the International Anti-Corruption Conference Series at Transparency International. And for over 25 years, he has worked globally in advocacy, governance, and transparency, pioneering global initiatives against corruption. He's also the founder of the IACC Young Journalist Initiative, the Film for Transparency Festival, a co-founder of the Fair Play Anti-Corruption Music Competition. So Roberto, I leave the word to you to introduce the Coronation film and the Coronation film interview. Thank you very much, and also enjoy the panel. I will come back at the end to close it and say the goodbye to everybody before the next event. Thank you, and thanks to all the speakers, their important work to be with us.
Well, thank you very much, Tatiana, and thank you to all our partners at Disruption Lab. It's a pleasure to be here for the second time. as you say, during such a probing times. As Tatiana mentioned, I'm the director of the Anti-Corruption Conference, the largest one in the world. And last December, we gathered around 10,000 people virtually. And one of our main and central areas of discussion was particularly COVID and the corruption challenges that COVID magnifies around the world. We need to remember that the pandemic is not only a pandemic around COVID itself, but it has created various waves of other pandemics, like in corruption and in human rights violations and in state surveillances. And this is part of what we're going to be discussing today, as well as trying to shed some light into what whistleblowing and what a whistleblower is and why it may not, and the great differences and challenges that whistleblowing protection people face around the world. So first of all, I'm really glad to be showing a remarkable interview being done bespoke for the conference that we did in December between AI Weiwei and Jess. Jess is the CEO of the Dog Society, a great partner to us in the film festival. And along with that, we're going to be seeing the trailer of Coronation, a film from AI Weiwei, which was unique in the sense of being such a timely piece of work, and also because it was directed from afar. You know that AI Weiwei cannot live in China, basically, so he's in exile. So he was able to direct the film from afar. So it's quite a remarkable piece of work. So join us in this first segment. Let's watch the trailer. Then let's go and hear the interview between Jess and AI Weiwei. And then let's come back and have the discussion with the panel members. At that point, of course, I will be introducing all of you. Thank you so much.
带他出来散步的那些往事，桌子凳子都在，但是我父亲现在是金色依旧，但是人却不在了。
So it was quite of a short trailer, as you can see. Please join us now. Let's watch the interview between Jess, CEO of the Dog Society, and AI Weiwei, where they will reflect upon the movie itself, the making of the movie, and some of the artistic elements around it, but most importantly about what it means to talk about state surveillance, censorship, and whistleblowing in China in such a times as with the pandemic, particularly shedding light on what has been happening in Wuhan.
I wanted to start by saying how much I loved this film of yours. I think it is my favorite of your films so far. Although you continue to make films, so maybe your next film will become my new favorite. But right now,
I will try.
I think Coronation is a brilliant film, and many people obviously agree with me. I liked very much that The Guardian said it was a slow cinema investigation.
I think the most interesting thing about the characters of film, which is how you use that time of this 2 hours or hour and a half. How do you use that time? It defines a film and also defines emotions. So,
but it feels as well to me that it fits, in the center of your work, which so much questions the relationship between the individual and the state. And during a pandemic, this relationship between the individual and the state is put under intense pressure. And I feel that your film is an extraordinary exploration of this vital question at this time. How was it possible for you to make this film? You must have made it very much under the radar. Can you speak a little bit about the process of making it?
I have experience in making films under surveillance, under very restricted state control. And that means if you're questioning the authority, you're facing a most severe crime. Also crime, even just questioning, or even just have that kind of curiosity. So once I said, if you're trying to understand your motherland, you're on the road to become a criminal. That's how I feel the authority, their power basically established and built on give you limited information or manipulate your information structure. By doing that, they establish a false legitimacy. So that is very crucial for any authoritarian state to control the information and put everybody in the vulnerable situation. The game is easy. They only let you know what they want to let you know, and they don't certainly will not let you know what they know, but you don't know it. And that game is so successful through history. And the so-called democratic world in the West basically has to be established under transparency. You know, so then you have the doubt, the liberty of doubt about any information before you can call it true or fake.
The liberty of doubt is a wonderful expression. I just want to pick that out from what you've just said. I wonder if you could go into this thought you're having a little deeper about what it means, a lack of transparency around a pandemic.
If we do have transparency, that means we believe in scientific clearance, you know, the research, and that means we would forget our own political position, but to give the information and the judgment to the people. And of course, people also may make a wrong judgment, but that is the only thing you can do, because the state or the system should work for the people. And so during the pandemic, because China, they never had a system of transparency. They never had a system for freedom of speech. That's why at the early time, they crushed some doctors. They're not even whistleblower. They just communicate between doctors in WeChat to say, hey, be careful, here's a disease, which looks quite serious. 8 of them are completely being seized. And the state media from a so-called CCTV or China Central Broadcasting Television announce they are criminals. They are just spreading rumors, and every media report the same story. So by doing that, I send out a signal to everybody not to pay attention. Mm-hmm. And the state, by doing that, delayed the information, not only to Chinese, but to all over the world. No, not only to politicians, but even to WHO, you know, the World Health Organization, also saying things with the same kind of tone as Chinese. This is not urgent. It's not serious enough to be called a pandemic.
You must hear some people admiring China's response to the pandemic, because there are some things which a top-down authoritarian state can do very efficiently. And here in the United Kingdom, I feel we have the opposite problem. We have seen a lot of confusion and changed policy and a lot of U-turns. And this must be interesting to you to sort of contemplate how people might admire such a system, because there is a temptation to think that in a pandemic, what we need is strong state. But then it's also an opportunity for a strong state to take more power from citizens. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I see this happens in the West. There's some kind of argument. Authoritarian state would control it better. I think basically what China did is a military type of action, and that kind of action is dismiss the humanity and the trust of the individuals who can make the best judgment about their behavior and about their life value. So I think that is ridiculous, and only has baseless about understanding what authoritarian state is about. They are not just limited the disease, they also limited your way of understanding and express yourself. That means your brain has been affected. And even without disease, your brain is not going to function. That's a real problem. Is, you know, it's not just one act. It's going to be your lifestyle to be told what to do, what not to do, and otherwise you're going to be put in jail.
I think one of my favorite scenes in your film is the relationship between the mother and the son, the two generations having this conversation about what is the role of the individual, and you know, is it admirable to carry out the orders of the state? It's such an extraordinarily intimate, so human and so political all at once. It's just a wonderful scene.
Thank you for you understand so well, because the artist had a horrible time at the beginning, said, I have to be locked up with my mom. I said, that's a wonderful time. You know, my father passed away. I never have a chance to ask him a personal question. Why don't you ask her and record it for me? So he said, no. You know, if I ask her, she has a problem with her hearing. So she would always pretend not to understand me, but I always have to listen to her. I said, please just do it, because otherwise you're wasting your time. So he did it. He's a good artist. And I think that is a very honest play about what China is about.
One of the other scenes from the film which really sticks in my head is that very long shot walking through the hospital corridors of the newly erected giant emergency hospital. And it goes on and on and on. And we feel this mixture of emotions of sort of a little impressed that this big thing has come together, but it becomes less human and more dystopian somehow the longer this shot goes on. And so beautifully encapsulates what you speak of, that the state is able to make these big moves of efficiency, but they are somehow devoid of all humanity.
Yeah. It's very much like a Kafka's novel. It's endless walking. That 4 minutes is unbearable. And also when him start to change his clothes, the civilian, under the surveillance, under the little nurse tell him what to do. through the camera.
For the audience who haven't seen the film yet, this is a doctor who is changing his clothes in order to make sure he carries no infection in the hospital. But he must do so in a tiny room, being surveyed on a surveillance camera and watched by someone else. So as you say, there is no trust even for these medical people, and their every move is being surveyed. It's an extremely chilling scene in the film.
And see, nobody's being trusted. Everything is a procedure. And so there's no individual judgment. The man walking through that, you see through his act, he's already become a robot. You know, he do his job, he's perfectly, you know, highly experienced, must be a very good doctor. But same times, there's no emotion, no personal judgment, no personal choice.
I feel as well your work on surveillance in other art pieces that you've done, and also as it appears in this film, is also a warning to us in the democratic West, because we're also seeing the extension of surveillance and data collection around COVID, with very little conversation about what it means to go down this road. Is that a conversation you have with Western friends?
Yeah, I think what we have to be careful is for ordinary people, privacy is part of our property of human rights. And many people would argue I have nothing to hide, but that you may not have nothing to hide, but the government has no business to surveilling you. Mm-hmm. The government is much stronger than George Orwell's 1984, but much stronger. So why we need to pay a tax, or some states you never pay tax, but for the Western people pay a tax to support that kind of system, to surveil all our life details. I think that is really questionable.
There is a very obvious kind of corruption which can show itself during a pandemic, and that concerns the contracts that are given to companies to provide equipment. We need suddenly overnight vast numbers of PPE, and in the UK there are some investigations happening into some of the companies that received those contracts to see if that was fair and appropriate. The normal processes of review are easily swept away by the urgency of the pandemic. And this reminds me of the work that you did, Weiwei, around the Sichuan earthquake. And you went there because in that earthquake, many people were killed. Many school children were killed when schools collapsed. And that turned out to be because they had been poorly constructed. The contracts that had been given had not been properly executed, had not been properly reviewed. And you did extraordinary pieces of artwork, including the display of the school bags a school bag to represent every child killed. What are your thoughts about this kind of corruption and how it's playing out in China during this pandemic?
I think the corruptions in general coexist with the power. Whoever has the power is going to use the power. The corruption just follows. In China, it's very different. The government gave their favor to industry because everything owned by one party. But in the West, still, all the government has to work with big corporations. Some of them may behave lawfully, and a lot of them are not. They are, there's a lot of political favor and economic gain in every decision. Absolutely. That's why we need the independent investigators, the special interests. Mm-hmm. We see those things not just happens in China, but everywhere. But of course, you say that nothing to do with me. You're wrong. It have every bit to do with everybody, because we have to protect the rights. We not protect self-interests.
Well, Weiwei, these were the questions that I wanted to ask. It just remains for me to thank you for your time. Thank you for your film.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't even speak about the musical score, which is also wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So
the music score is done by a friend of mine who is a punk musician, very talented. Thank you.
Yeah, it adds a wonderful extra dimension. So yeah, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful rest of day.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. So I think that there couldn't be any better framing for this opening panel, and potentially no better framing perhaps for the whole of the conference, that this interview, it touches so many aspects that we can relate to, not only in regards to China, but also in regards to almost any other country around the world. As it was said, the right to question, the right to judge, and the right to gather more information about what your government is doing, supposedly on your behalf, could even be a path for you to actually be nailed down as a criminal. I think that this is something that our panelists will be able to reflect and to see how it happens in their own countries. And let me just, to help out a bit more with the framing, throw you some numbers. So if you have your notebooks out there, please take them out and put your pen ready so that we remember these numbers throughout the next conversation, but also throughout the next of the conference. Whistleblowing is part of the freedom of expression right, a fundamental human right. Nevertheless, we can see that during this pandemic, I'm talking precisely about 2019 and 2020, 58 journalists around the world have been killed for doing their job, for reporting mostly on issues around corruption and human rights. 525 have been imprisoned, and more than 129 are still missing. This is a major spike as a trend around the world, that we can see how the problems of the pandemic have exacerbated. We can see, for example, how the freedom of speech, in terms of an index, the countries that we're going to be talking about, the freedom of speech index surveys 180 countries, where China is on the number 177, which is the lowest. 180 is the lowest. South Africa ranks on the 31st, which is quite high on the ranking. Thuli, you may be able to tell us more about that. Italy, where one of our panelists is from as well, ranks on the 41st. And Mexico, sadly speaking, kind of ranks in the 143. What does that relate to the fact of whistleblowing? What does that mean for people to feel safe to report corruption and wrongdoing during this pandemic? For this, we have our next panel, and I'm really, really proud to introduce to you, first of all, Professor Thuli Madonsela. She's professor of the Stellenbosch University, and she's a former public prosecutor of South Africa. Thuli, as an advocate of the High Court of South Africa, is also the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and a law professor at the university. She conducts and coordinates social justice research and teaches constitutional and administrative law. She is the founder of the Tuma Foundation, which is an independent democracy leadership and literacy public benefit organization, and she's the convener of the Social Justice M-Plan, a Marshall Plan-like initiative aimed at catalyzing progress towards ending poverty and reducing inequality by 2030. Then we have from Mexico, María de Los Ángeles Estrada. María is Executive Director of Transparency and Anti-Corruption Initiative. I will introduce her full bio when it's time for her to speak. And also we have Stefano Fusco, which is the co-founder of Noi Denunceremo, or We Denounce, the Truth and Justice Committee for COVID-19 Victims in Italy. Then again, I will read your bio when it's your time to speak. For now, I would love and have the honor to give the voice to Thuli Madonsela from South Africa, a personal friend of mine, and she can tell us more about how you see the situation of whistleblowing, not only in South Africa, but also abroad or even worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Roberto, and thank you, dear colleagues, for the defending the truth, and in this case, defending the truth through whistleblowing. My focus is on the treatment of whistleblowers, and my main message is that we should treat whistleblowers better. So why should we treat whistleblowers better? Let's start with my first slide. Slide talks to what is a right. A whistleblower is someone who makes public or reports to an appropriate authority a witnessed or suspected crime, act of dishonesty or wrongdoing. In the slide, you can see something that says, a picture that says, in case of whistleblower, be good. But we've just heard from them. Hello?
Yes.
I think there is a problem with the mic.
Yeah, we're experiencing some technical problems with Thuli. So maybe, Thuli, can you help us trying to start again, or maybe we will have to switch the order of the speakers so that we can take care of your connection in the meantime. But for now, I mean, thank you for your patience, dear viewers. And Thuli, I may ask you if you can start again and see whether we can have a better connection with you. Thank you.
Right. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you better.
Hello?
Now I can hear you better, but your
right.
voice cuts off quite a lot.
Right. Perhaps you can have somebody and then to change into a different Wi-Fi.
Very good. So we're gonna be changing the order of the speakers. There is no problem for that. Thank you, Thuli, and thank you, everybody, for your patience. So let's please move on and have María de Los Ángeles Estrada from Mexico. She is the Executive Director of the Transparency and Anti-Corruption Initiative. Ángeles, she also works in the School of Government and Public Transformation of the TEC, or the Technological School of Monterrey in the north of Mexico. She obtained a master's degree in international law from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Tufts University, and a law degree from the Autonomous Technological Institute of Mexico, in which she teaches now. Her thesis, which is about the Geneva Convention and non-international armed conflicts, was published in 2006 by the Institute of Legal Research of the National Autonomous University in Mexico. She has worked for the Institute of Access to Government Information and Protection of Personal Data and the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, which it is referred to as the INL, of the Embassy of the United States of America in Mexico City. There, she worked as a culture of lawfulness program specialist. She co-founded Legalidad for Mexico, a nonprofit civil association that aims to provide Mexican children and youth with legal and socio-emotional tools so they can face situations of illegality and violence. Maria, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And as we talked before, I guess that one of the key points that we may want to address is to shed some light to the viewers about the situation in Mexico in regards to, violence, insecurity, and a culture that Mexico or Mexicans may or may not have about denouncing or actually choosing not to denounce. Please, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roberto. Good morning to everyone. So thank you for the invitation to the Disruption Network Lab to creating this space, for creating these spaces in order to talk about this specific issue that I think that we need to talk about more about whistleblowers. So let me start saying that the fight against corruption in Mexico is a factor that is growing every day. There is still, however, a reluctance to regulate mechanisms to encourage the reporting of acts of corruption here in Mexico. In particular, the existing deficiency around the protection of whistleblowers is alarming because this endangers the collaboration of citizens in fighting and preventing corruption. So regarding the fight against corruption, in addition to these preventive structural measures and for the effective sanctions of the illegal acts, there are measures linked to linked to the detection of investigation of corruption. Among these are the creation of technical instruments, of technical tools that allow people to report corruption openly and in a simple way. So in a nutshell, what we need is to design a reliable protection system for whistleblowers here in Mexico. So let me talk about specifically the Mexican case. So the Mexican case is peculiar because despite the efforts that we have carried out to reform the regulatory framework to combat corruption, the specific laws that should address these issues are just omissive about how do we have to regulate and to protect whistleblowers. This is a regulatory deficiency, of course, but we also have some other problems that maybe I would say that are previous to the law or the regulatory problem. And this is that we don't have whistleblowers. So how are we going to regulate something that nobody uses? How are we going to talk about whistleblower protection if we don't have whistleblowers? So let me show you some specific numbers about what I am talking about. So in 2019, we had an unrecorded crime rate in Mexico of 92.4%. So this means that just 7.6% of the crimes committed in the country were denounced, where someone complained about these crimes. This is a huge amount of unrecorded crimes. The next one, please. So in 2019, the reporting crime was up to 0.6, as I said. However, in just 69% of those cases, the prosecutor's office of Mexico opened investigation files. And in just 44% of the cases, well, nothing happened. So you can see there how, like, the things that happen with the investigations. Basically, like, the big amount of investigations show that nothing happened. And then, like, the 29.2% other is in process, whatever that means. And this is important because we don't have enough information about the prosecutions, about the investigations that the prosecutor's office starts in Mexico. The next one, please. So, among the reasons that the victims give in order to not to report crimes, 64% of those reasons are attributable to the authorities. 64%. The next one, please. I'm going to show you like the reasons that they say regarding to not complaining. So basically, as you can see, the first one is because the people think that it's a lost, they lost their time because nothing happens when they complain. The next one, like this one, is maybe of course one of the most important ones is that people mistrust or doesn't trust in authority. The next one is that we have long and difficult procedures. We have hostile attitudes from the authorities. And the last one, but the last one is also very important. People are afraid of getting extorted. They fear of extortion becoming from the authorities. So we have a very, very difficult situation when it comes to talk about why do we need to denounce or to complain, and why do people don't do it here in Mexico. The next one, please. So what we thought about is that how can we make the people complain about what is happening or what would be happening in a pandemic situation. As you know, just Weiwei said something like that. In these specific situations, the corruption it's bigger because someone wants, in these kind of situations, someone will, of course, will try to get something personal, some personal gain against society or against someone else. So in the beginning of March of 2020, we were horrified looking at what was happening in Europe and in Asia. And here in Mexico, we were sure that we would be in the same place or even in a worse situation pretty soon. So since then, we knew that we didn't have enough hospitals, we didn't have enough doctors, masks, ventilators, antibacterial gel. We haven't enough of anything. But at the time, the scenario was pretty much the same in every country of the world. And we knew that COVID would hit us hard. So the health emergency was not the only concern that we had. Corruption was also a real and present consideration, like Mexico and other countries of Latin America, because they experience these situations regularly. And as I said, in extreme need situations, this can peak. So abuse and acts of corruption were being performed by people who should be helping their fellow citizens, right? So therefore, together with a very important NGO in Mexico, Derechos Humanos y Litigio Estratégico Mexicano, together with the TEC de Monterrey, we designed and created a reporting platform that we called Denuncia Corrupción, or Whistleblowing Corruption. The next one, please. So whistleblowing corruption is a friendly tool that any person can use to report acts of corruption related to the detection, handling, treatment of the COVID-19 virus. And right now, you can also use it to report some kind of corruption while you get the vaccine. So the information that came through in platform provides us with enough data to create a corruption victimization measurement in the health sector, a figure that was unavailable or that is still unavailable in Mexico and maybe in a lot of countries. So the next one, please. Can we go to the, I'm going to show you some, a video. Can we show the video? I can't hear the, so these are some of the experiences that people, that citizens, that Mexican citizens just showed or let us know through the whistleblowing corruption tool that we designed. So as I was saying, the next one, please, the next slide. Thank you. So this is the tool that we designed. As I was saying, you can report in acts of corruption within regarding the treatment of the COVID-19, but right now you can also report corruption while you receive the vaccine. So the next one, please. So what can we report in this tool? So you can report if someone asks you for money, if someone asks you for sex. We have had some reports about that. And you can also report if someone received the vaccine while he or she was not in the list. You can also report if you know someone that is selling vaccines. Here in Mexico, just the government can't put the vaccines to people, and we don't have right now a market of vaccines. And right now here in Mexico, we have a huge selection of coming. So you can also report if you were promised a vaccine in exchange of your vote. We have had some specific reports about this. The next one, please. So what are we collecting the data for? So first of all, to promote the report of corruption through a tool that guarantees anonymity. The second one is to generate time statistics about corruption experiences. The next one is if the people ask us for doing this, to give them legal advice and support in case they want to present a formal complaint. And the next one is to inform the administrative and criminal authorities about the corruption occurring in the health sector during the pandemic. The next one, please. So these are our results. We have had since April of 2020 to December of 2020, we have had 381 reports. And maybe you can think that that's not a big number. But let me show you the next slide. So you can see that like every month, we have approximately 42 reports, and the government had 53. The Mexican government had 53 reports through another tool that they had. And if we compare these with the Advocacy and Legal Advice Centers of International Transparency, they did something similar, but worldwide. They had approximately 200 reports every month. So yes, I know that I have just 1 or 2 minutes more, but I just want to close this by saying that we need to design tools. We need to use technology in order to create some helping tools to citizens so that they can be, or that they can feel trusted in that they can complain about something. And maybe later we can talk about how do we how like culturally, how do Mexico think about the whistleblowers? So I'm gonna stop here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, María. A really interesting presentation. If you don't mind, I mean, I would like to save the questions till the very end so that we can have a more of a fluid conversation along with Thuli and Stefano, and then to invite the audience to ask questions. So I will leave it like that for the moment. And now, Thuli, let's try it again. Let's see if the connection is better. Let's try to do it slowly and nicely. And hopefully we can hear you perfectly this time for your presentation. Thanks so much. Thuli, go ahead.
For the hello, can you hear me now? Thank you, dear colleagues,
Much
for
better.
the privilege to be part of this timely conversation on defending the truth, focusing on whistleblower protection. The main point I want to deal with is we should treat whistleblowers better. The next slide. On this slide, I want us to think about how do people react during whistleblowing, even good people. We have a picture there that says, in case of a whistleblower, break glass. It sounds like an overreaction, but think about how companies react when somebody has whistleblown about things that are going wrong in their companies. How countries, or some countries, have reacted when somebody whistleblew about COVID-19. We still have the Wuhan story, for example, about how China dealt with the whistleblowers. But in the rest of the world, if I look at my continent, Africa, there are some countries where there's been just some kind of quietness in the way they've dealt with COVID-19. And I think if you're looking at COVID-19, there are 4 areas of whistleblowing. It's been about the numbers. It's been about the procurement of PPEs. And then now it's about vaccines. In South Africa, it's also been about police brutality. So before we look at how do we treat whistleblowers better, let's start with asking ourselves, what is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is someone who makes public or reports on, or, okay, sorry, a whistleblower is someone who makes public or reports to an appropriate authority a witnessed or suspected crime, act of dishonesty, or wrongdoing. Next slide. Why should you and I care that whistleblowers are treated better? During my time as public protector, I was exposed to a whole lot of wrongdoing, from the kind of wrongdoing that Transparency International and the International Anti-Corruption Conference deal with. And these would be corruption, fraud, and related kinds of dishonesty. But whistleblowing is also important when it comes to why did a patient die in hospital? Whistleblowing is also important when it comes to government service delivery. Why does a community not have water? Why has a housing settlement not been delivered? And whistleblowers are the people who tell us who has been paid and why there hasn't been delivery. What we have discovered just generally in the field of investigations is that auditing, which we trust a lot, exposes only about 10% of corruption and fraud, whilst whistleblowing is responsible for most exposures of wrongdoing, be it criminal or civil. Next slide. Having determined that we should treat whistleblowers better, I must indicate to you in what way are we not treating them well enough if we think they are this treasured component of society when it comes to uncovering the truth. And we do know, as Justice Brandeis once said, sunshine is the best of disinfectants, and whistleblowers are part of that sunshine. My experience as a public protector, as an investigator, and as somebody who's been in law reform and now pretty much involved in democracy leadership and in advancing social justice, I found that whistleblowers are not treated well in three key areas. One is legal protection, the second one is culture, and the third one is personal impact. So we need to improve these three areas if we want to treat whistleblowers better. Improving legal protection, that's the next slide. Even South Africa, which has one of the best legal frameworks in Africa, it has cracks through which whistleblowers fall. First, the reach of laws on whistleblowing doesn't cover everyone who is truly a whistleblower. For example, in South Africa, if you're a business person who is trying to tender for PPEs or vaccine storage or anything like that, and then you discover that there was a bribe, as my colleague from Mexico spoke about. Somebody asked you for a bribe, or if you're a woman, they asked you for sexual favors or things like that. If you report this, there is no recourse for you other than the criminal justice system, in that you can be put on witness protection, but that's a lengthy process. Other whistleblowers are protected by the Protected Disclosures Act, but in our case, it's limited to employees. The other part of the law that is problematic is that you're protected from retaliatory action, from suffering from an occupational detriment, but you're not protected from masked retaliation. If somebody, for example, fires you for practically using too much toilet paper, as I have found with many whistleblowers, you are going to be dismissed. For example, one woman I will call Miss HR. Miss HR was fired for being rude and hierarchical. How many people do you know who are rude and hierarchical? She had just been working in that government department for about 3 weeks when she discovered that they were paying for things that they shouldn't be paying for, and they were paying for things that had not been done. When she refused, they said they were going to get the politician to get involved, and within days, she was suspended for being hierarchical and rude. And this is somebody who had had a stellar career until that particular time. I can give you various examples of people who suffered in a similar manner, and some of them ending up with mental health challenges. Fortunately, in South Africa, if you are an employee and you are under the PDA, a public protector or any other institution can give you back your job. And in this particular case, we gave her a job back and others. But there's still another problem: personal impact. I mean, if we think about whistleblowing, I would say nobody goes through it without an impact in their own personal lives. Marriages can end, mental health can be affected, finances become a problem. And one of the whistleblowers that I dealt with in the state capture investigation, I don't know if you know about the investigation into state capture in South Africa, that resulted in a commission that I ordered the government to establish. One of the key whistleblowers there, Musilo, who's now written a book about her experience, was working for a private company. They went for her, used the criminal justice system to sue her, used the civil justice system to sue her, turned the tables on her. So whilst the Protected Disclosures Act protects her, it is not enough. It's worse in other countries where you don't even have the Protected Disclosures Act. The next one, which impacts on other countries, the next slide is you will see a lovely cultural picture, but that's not the kind of culture that I'm talking about when I say transform culture. When people think about culture, they normally think about African culture or indigenous culture. Every society has a culture, which is what we regard as normative, as valued, and as right in that particular society. All societies have cultures and subcultures. And in line with what my colleagues have said about whistleblowing, there are several problems about that. One, for example, is negative language. Whistleblowers, as you know, in South Africa, there is no elegant way of defining a whistleblower. They are called impimbi, which is basically a snitch or a spy. That is in Zulu, Sotho, and most of the African languages. There's also just generally negative perceptions in that even if you do it for good, you end up being isolated because nobody trusts you, which takes me to the third problem: cognitive dissonance. Everyone says they love a whistleblower. Government, civil society, companies. But most of the whistleblowers that I dealt with as a pub protector ended up with nobody wanting to employ them afterwards. So why is it that when we love whistleblowers, there is this cognitive dissonance between what we say we stand for and what we do? Next slide. And the last issue, which has to do with the culture and the cognitive.
Yes. Well, once again, this is very, very unfortunate. We're experiencing problems with Thuli. Let's give her a couple of seconds to see if she's going to be able to reconnect back, or whether our fantastic technical team at Disruption Lab can bring her back with us. In the meantime, it might be good, for the sake of use of all the efficiency of time, to bring Stefano into the picture. Okay, so it seems to be that it's a bit difficult to bring back Thuli. Her connection seems to be broken, so we will switch to Stefano Fusco. And once we're able to get another connection with Thuli, we will ask her to give us kind of at the last minute. But as you can see, she gave us as well a really, really excellent framing of what a whistleblower is, what it's not, and the cultural references to it. And the case of South Africa exemplifies very well, for other cases around the world. So without further ado, Stefano, you are the co-founder of Noi Denunciaremo, I hope I pronounce it right, or We Denounce, the Truth and Justice Committee for COVID-19 Victims from Italy. We Denounce was founded in March 22 of last year as a Facebook group from the agency of Luca and his son, who is Stefano Fusco, precisely a few days after the loss of their father and grandfather after having tested positive for COVID-19. The committee of Noi Denunciaremo was born in Bergamo, Italy, out of a need for justice and truth, to give peace to the people who have not been able to have a proper burial. Noi Denunciaremo was created to ensure that those who made mistakes will have to answer questions and take on their own responsibilities. This non-profit committee is collecting every single complaint and making it available to the judiciary at every stage of the investigation and the process that will ensue. The group now, in such a short amount of time, counts more than 70,000 members in Facebook, as I understand. So, Stefano, we will give you the floor and tell us about the platform and about how not only Bergamo, but potentially in Italy at large, we could understand better the situation for whistleblowers and the relationship they may have towards government and other entities. Thank you. Over to you, Stefano.
Thank you, Roberto. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. First of all, I would like to say about whistleblowing that in Italy, unfortunately, we don't know what is a whistleblower. I'm the first one that when I heard first time the word whistleblowing, I had to Google it because I didn't know what it was. Once I read what it was, I realized that my group and all the people in my group did a huge spontaneous whistleblowing activity. To explain you better, I need to tell you the whole story. So, as you said, I come from Bergamo, and you all probably know my town for the first slide, please, for the military trucks that carried away the coffins of the people died in Bergamo on the first wave of the pandemic. It was right 1 year ago, so March 18, 2020. Now Bergamo is known as the Wuhan of Europe, since we were the first to meet the virus, and here the virus is very, very hard. Only in my province, we've had more than 6,000 deaths just in the first wave from February to the end of April. At the beginning of March 2021, we counted 28,500 deaths just in Lombardy region, which has 10 million inhabitants. So it's the highest rate in Europe. The story of COVID in Italy, but especially in Lombardy, starts on February 21, 2020, in the town of Codogno, which is 1 hour away from Milan. In the evening of the 21, at the local hospital, we found our patient zero. It was a guy of 38 years old, and it was found positive just because a nurse decided to break a protocol and to make a swab test to him. Because in that moment, since Italy was totally unprepared to the pandemic, we didn't have any test. And the protocol said you had to test just people who went in contact with Chinese. And this guy didn't went in contact with any Chinese. So what happened once they detected the virus? They did all the right things. They immediately closed the hospital. They started to sanitize the hospital. And in the meanwhile, our central government, in according with the region, decided to lock down the entire town of Codogno. That was the first local lockdown in Italy. And it worked. The infection there was contained. Now I tell you the other part of the story when, everything went wrong. 2 days after, on February 23, we found two at the hospital of Alzano Lombardo, which is 2 kilometers far away from Bergamo. It was Sunday, and the hospital was full of patients, visitors, and doctors inside. They closed the hospital for 2 hours, and then they reopened it. They never tested anyone inside the hospital, and they simply say to anyone, just go home, have a shower, put the clothes in the washing machine, there's nothing to worry about. No one was tested, as I said, and according to the official version, in 2 hours they sanitized the entire hospital, while it took 3 weeks to do the same thing in Codogno. The two infected were brought to the Bergamo hospital because that was the COVID hub of the province, and unfortunately they both will die in a couple of hours. We have to remember that in those days, there were no masks available and nobody was forced to wear them like now. So we've had dozens of people inside an infected hospital who were free to go all around and to spread the infection all over the Italy. From the day we found the virus on 23 of February, they never locked down Alzano and Embro, the two towns. And the life for us was still normal. We lived those 2 weeks like a normal period. So going to work, go to the restaurant, have a shopping, meet other people, and everything without masks. Why? Because the media said us, especially the television, said us there were nothing to be worried of. It was just a bit more than a flu, and only the elderly people were in danger for this. But we are all very, very calm about that. But on March 8th, they decided to lock down the entire Lombardy region because the infection was already out of control. The Lombardy region has 10 million inhabitants. It was too late. 2 days after, on March 11, we were forced to lock down the entire country. On that day, I lost my grandfather, who was in extended care for a rehab after a small stroke he had. And like thousands of people in Italy, I wasn't able to see him. I wasn't able to make a funeral to him. And it was carried away. Next slide, please, so you can understand it better. So that was the situation in these days. The crematorium in Bergamo was overwhelmed, and it was carried away with military trucks in another region to be cremated. Next slide, please. As you can see, all the military trucks moved something like 900 people of Bergamo in another province to be cremated. And he went to Piedmont region. And in the confusion of the moment, the funeral home who was in charge of the cremation of my grandpa told me they lost the urn with the ashes of my grandpa, and they didn't know where it was. I was able to find them just after 14 days from his death. But after what happens, I can't be sure. I can't say with certainty those are the really ashes of my grandpa. Well, the story of the group Noi Denunceremo starts, as you said, 11 days after, on March 22. I was at the phone with my father, and we were wondering if we were the only ones who believed that the entire management of the pandemic has some dark points. So I said to him, why don't we create a Facebook group just to remember the grandpa and to see if there is other people, someone else like me and you who thinks the same. So we did, we created this group, and we wanted to report the situation we were living in Bergamo. We wanted to know if someone in the institution did something wrong. We wanted to know exactly what happened here and why it happened here. Since the Lombardy region has the best healthcare system in the country and one of the best of Europe. So we were not afraid about COVID since we saw military trucks and all of these people died. We just wanted to know if someone were able to contain this massacre. Next slide, please. So this is just a part of the Bergamo cemetery in those days. Well, I believe that the group would have reached hundreds of people, maybe a couple of thousand. In fact, in the first 24 hours, 5,000 people joined the group. 14,000 in the first week, 35,000 in the first month. I couldn't believe that because we were not alone at all. As you said, now we are around 70,000. people started to whistleblowing without even know that. So they started to put the photos of their relatives passed away for COVID, and they started to tell their stories. And even if the stories were all different, there was a red line that connected all of them. And there was the feeling of abandonment. Without clear protocols, without any instruction for doctors, thousands of people died at home. We don't even know the correct number, and we suppose that the real number of people who died in the first wave is at least the double of the official one. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a post on our group. You can see these are a friend of mine, parents. They both died in 4 days for COVID. And this is just one of the thousands of posts we have. After 1 month from the creation of the group, we had more than 10,000 stories on the group. So we decided to create this committee to give the possibility to all of our members to turn their stories legal complaints. Since the prosecutor office in Bergamo, thanks to the media echo that our group created, was like, I would say, forced to open an investigation about the management of the pandemic. So we created this committee, no-profit committee, and in 3 different days, next slide, please, named Denuncia Day, so Complaints Day, we filed their complaints to the prosecutor office in Bergamo. Our complaints are all addressed to unknown. We don't point the finger to no one, even if anyone has his own opinion. We simply ask to the prosecutor and to the justice to shed light on these stories because we consider that they have a lot of dark points. Thanks to the media too, the investigation is still ongoing, and we did a huge work in research of documents to help the prosecutor office in shed light to these stories. For example, we have discovered that Italy didn't have an updated pandemic plan. Our pandemic plan was dated 2017, but since if you compare the document, it was a totally copy and paste of the pandemic plan of 2006. So they never upgraded it during the last 11 years. And even if the World Health Organization and the European community said several times, 8 times in 11 years, that we were forced to upgrade our pandemic plan. And that's why we didn't have PPE, we didn't have any protocol of action. And that's why more than 300 family doctors died for COVID, because they didn't know how to face and how to fight this virus. We have always considered the entire category of doctors, family doctors, nurses, volunteer of the Red Cross, like the first victims of this pandemic, because they were forced to face this incredible enemy without any kind of protection. I've seen with my eyes doctors using trash bag instead of surgical shoes because they didn't have PPI. I've seen doctors try in any way to sanitize their clothes because they didn't have gloves and masks. I have a lot of friends in the United States. I was forced to call them to have some masks because the masks were unavailable here. We didn't have any masks, and since the situation there was still good, they shipped me 100 masks that I distribute to doctors, friends, relatives, because here the situation was incredible. If they told me I was going to experience a war in my life, maybe I could have believed it. If I had been told I was going through a pandemic, I would have never believed it. The pandemic for us Europeans is something relegated to history books like the Spanish flu in 1918 or the bubonic plague in 14th centuries. I think we have had the arrogance to think that certain things in our perfect world would never come, and we were wrong. So that's basically what we are and what we are doing in this period. Now it's 1 year since everything has started, and right? Today is the National Day remembering the victims of COVID-19. Today, the Prime Minister of Italy was in Bergamo to honor the memory of all the people and doctors that died here, unfortunately. So this is our story.
Oh, thank you so much, Stefano. Quite dramatic the way you have framed it, but at the same time, it's pretty inspiring to see how much people came together to tell their stories, which is, a bit of a different thing than whistleblowing, but this is why we are here, to get a bit more of clarity about what whistleblowing is. And yeah?
Yes, one last thing. With the group, we simply did the first step. So we showed to other people that we did something trying to change the situation, try to know the truth. And since the people saw that, they say, well, I'm not alone. If it does, I can do the same. And so they started like an avalanche, they start from a very small part of snow and it becomes a huge avalanche. It was the same thing for us.
No, very good. Yeah, very true. Very much true. And usually that is kind of the multiplying effect that everybody's looking for around the world. So some bad news to all the friends who are watching us. We could not get Thuli back. She's having kind of some internet connection problems. We will try to have her video with her presentation available to all of you after we finish this panel. So I do invite you to come back and watch it. It's quite important because from her we can learn what a whistleblower is and some of the most important aspects to bear in mind, like how critical it is when you denounce and how it can have an effect on your life. How can you be then seen by members of your society, so on and so forth. It is quite a complex matter. But going back to the main theme of our panel, is whistleblowing the magic wand to tell the truth about the pandemic and the wrongdoing about the pandemic? I will ask, our two panelists to give us a very quick yes or no kind of answer, if you think it is and you think it's not. And very, very quickly, in a matter of 20 seconds, maybe tell us what do you think it is or what do you think it may not. Now that we have understood a little bit better what it is, what does it mean to blow the whistle? So I don't know, Ángeles, for you, do you think it's a magic wand?
I mean, I do think that it's a magic wand. However, the magic has to appear within a specific environment. So if this environment doesn't exist, the magic is not going to show it off. So basically, we need whistleblowers, we need processes, we need tools, we need, and then if you have the combination of those things, protection, anonymity, and other things, then maybe we can say that whistleblowing is a magic wand, but not just by itself.
Thank you, Stefano. Now that you know more about what whistleblowing and denouncing is, what do you think? Do you think it's a yes or no question? And what does that? What do you mean by that?
Yes, I really think it can be the magic wand, but it depends. For example, like in Mexico, people search for anonymity, and I can understand why. Here in Italy, people want to show the face, want to see it's me that I denounce this thing, it's me that I whistle the blow. Because here in Italy, thanks to God, we don't have problems with police brutality, the drug cartels, or whatever. So people want to put their face on this thing, even because all the people who died here, they tested like numbers, and they are not numbers. They were people, they were father, mothers, and there were stories and families behind them.
Very good. Thank you so much. Now, before I turn to read some of the questions from our audience, which there are quite a few, and all of them are really, really interesting. I mean, I would love to see again from you, Ángeles, and from Stefano, if you could have a short reflection about how do you now, after hearing Thuli and after hearing each other, how do you now, or how would you explain what whistleblowing is and what whistleblowing is not to anybody who asks you around the street? I don't know who wants to take a first stab at this challenge.
Stefano, please.
Maria, if you want. Okay.
You first.
When I speak about whistleblowing with my friends and with people, I've always said, do you know what is whistleblowing? And practically everyone say to me, no, I don't. And I always say that, you know what is WikiLeaks? Yes, okay, it's the same thing. You have to report something which is against human rights, against some problem that must to be shed on light. So it's something that must be created into the Italian mentality. The Italian mentality is I don't report not because I'm afraid of it, but because things will never change. So people has to start to think that things can be changed if you work on it. If you collect a lot of people asking the same thing or doing the same thing. And that's what we did, for example, with our complaints. So people wanted to denounce the problem of the management of the pandemic, but they always said, well, things will never change. Once we started 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 1,200 complaints, 1,000 complaints, people say, well, maybe this time I can give my contribute to this, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so things will never change. This kind of a pessimism. Do you feel the same kind of pessimism going in Mexico, Ángeles? And back to the question that I asked, how would you explain to anybody, maybe your aunt or a friend of yours, what whistleblowing is, and particularly what whistleblowing is not?
Yes. So yes, we have the same feeling here, and maybe even worse. So here in Mexico, how do we understand what a whistleblower is? So, like in a very simple level, a whistleblower is someone who reports corruption or who reports some fraud or abuse or something that endangers the public health and the safety of someone who is in the position to rectify the wrongdoing. So this is another thing that maybe another difference that we have between Mexico and Italy. When we thought about whistleblower, we think about a person that works inside the organization where the wrongdoing is taking place. So we have this division between denunciantes or a complaint, someone that makes a complaint, and the whistleblower that works within the organization. So it's like an insider, right? So it's that's the main idea that we have here in Mexico whenever we thought about a whistleblower. And that's why we need some kind of anonymity. And the whistleblowers ask for anonymity because they can lose their jobs if they complain about something that is happening inside the company or inside the government or inside the place where the wrongdoing is taking place.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really fundamental differentiation here, which I wanted to get at. So it's fantastic that you did it. One thing is to denounce wrongdoing that you may be kind of seeing it happening somewhere else or to someone else, or you're just some kind of a bystander to it. And another thing is to denounce wrongdoing in the place where you work, in your own environment, where this cognitive dissonance that Thuli referred to can be extremely strong. In some of the most advanced countries in terms of whistleblowing legislation, you could even have different sets of legislation for people who work in governments, people who work in private sector. That happens in USA, and a special provision for people that deal with military or national security issues. So there you can see what has been happening with Snowden and some others. This differentiation is critical because on one side, you may have somebody denouncing their own experience, going through storytelling, catching the attention potentially of investigative journalists who will continue to ask the questions. And on the other side, you have the whistleblower who sometimes has to deal with this issue entirely by him or herself, at least at the beginning. And that may actually mean that they're going to be subject to harassment, not only professional or work-related harassment, but also potentially social harassment. The friends may actually start distrusting this person. It can actually create absolute havoc in your own life. So it is therefore a far more complex way of dealing with wrongdoing that we can ever imagine. And that is why it's so important that in terms of the pandemic, the audience and ourselves understand better that whistleblowing goes way beyond not only the nice little word in English that, as we have seen, does not only translate bad in other cultures, but actually may mean the opposite thing in other cultures. So, of course, the audience will have the chance to continue with these conversations throughout these days. We have some really good experts in following panels. Anna Myers, Juliette Dreyfus, all colleagues of mine and friends will give you a masterclass on that, I am pretty sure. Having said that, I'll just want to invite the audience to write down some other numbers so you understand the complexity of the issue that we are dealing with in the pandemic, and especially now in regards to the race for vaccination. While Italy has had over 100,000 dead people with the pandemic, at the current rate, they may need yet another 475 days to get 70% of the population vaccinated. Mexico has lost by death, obviously, 196,000 people and counting because of COVID. And it seems to be that at the rate that is going, Mexico may need 9,085 days at the rate of vaccination that is going right now to get 70% of the people vaccinated. We're talking about 3 years here. South Africa has had 51,000 deaths so far and may need 14.6 thousand days to reach 70% of people vaccinated. I don't know if somebody has a calculator there, but 14,000 days means quite a few amount of years to actually reach. Sorry?
More than 30 years.
Well, more than 30 years to reach herd immunization. And China, with what is being seen as a strikingly low 4.5 thousand deaths, seems to be needing 2.1 thousand days to reach 70% of vaccination. So this is a story that will definitely continue for the years to come, and therefore the issue that this panel addresses is so important. So let's go to the questions. Unfortunately, we had some questions for Thuli in regard to South Africa. I'm not really sure that any of us are in a position to answer them. So if you allow me, I will take these questions and write to her, or we can write to her and see whether we can post the answers a little bit later. So the first question that I would like to address, which is to Stefano, is whether do you think that the Italian government has done a good job handling the pandemic? The person writes, in Mexico, they use it as an example of what we should have done. What would you change to improve it? Over to you, Stefano.
Well,
please be very short.
My opinion is that the Italian state didn't do a very good job at all, especially in the first wave of the pandemic, because in that moment they needed to take some not popular decision, and they didn't want to take this burden, so they give the responsibility to other part of the state. No one has never locked down Alzano when we found the virus, maybe because Alzano is one of the most industrialized town into the most industrialized region of Italy. So it produces annual turnover of 700 million euros. And the state says it was up to the region to lock down the town. The region said it was up to the mayor of the town to lock down the town. And no one had the courage to take this decision. This is just one of the examples of the management of the crisis.
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. Ángeles, do you think that Mexicans did see Italy? Of course, I mean, we're generalizing here, but did see Italy as an example of how to handle the crisis? What is it that Mexicans may have seen as a positive element of that?
I mean, if you compare it with what we have experienced here, yes, Italy, it's an example for us. Basically because we haven't had any kind of procedure or policy or guidance from the government. So yes, they don't want to take the burden like in Italy, but I mean, at least in Italy, they had some kind of guidance. Here we have had nothing, right? So we have had 200,000 people dead, and like some numbers are roughly in the like doubling, or like, yes, doubling that number. So yes, I think that right now, with the situation that we are living in Mexico, yes, Italy and most of the countries of Europe, we can use some parts of their procedures and their policies as an example. When you Roberto mentioned that we have 9,085, I thought that you would say 85 years to finish with the vaccination in Mexico, but because it seems like that. And if you add the corruption, like the corruption subject to this, it's becoming not just a pandemic like in the health sector, but a pandemic in the administrative sector, with the corruption that we are experiencing right now. So yes.
Very good. This is a question that was initially addressed to Stefano, but allow me to address it to both of you, since we have such a compact panel. Be very, very short in your answers. So the original question to Stefano was, do you, hold on a second, I just lost it. Do you plan in the future to develop a proper whistleblowing platform related to COVID issues? Maybe something like a global leaks, for example? So that's for you, Stefano, which can resume in what are your next steps for the platform. Same may go to you, Ángeles. What would be the next steps? And would you go into a more sort of a hardcore whistleblowing sort of a channel to offer to the people? Stefano, 30, 20 seconds, please.
That could be a very good idea, and we were already thinking about something like that. But first, we want to see how the investigation will end, if there is an end to this investigation. And we hope we can do something of whistleblowing, but not referred to the pandemic, because we all hope the pandemic will have an end pretty soon, even if I don't think so.
Very good, Helen. Ángeles?
Yes, so we want to increase the amount of reports, of course. We also want to offer to the government the results so that they can make some specific corruption maps, and they maybe can design a preventive policy of corruption.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much. Our next question from the audience, and this once again goes to both of you, is about trust. I mean, how would you in overall, how would you rate the trust between citizens and government in Italy and in Mexico? And the question is whether we need more, or do we have enough trust of that? How much do people actually trust the official stories and the official numbers and whatever they're trying to tell you through media? So, Ángeles, maybe you go first this time.
Yes. So here in Mexico, we have a very ample problem in this regard. We have more than 90% of people not trusting in the government, in the authorities. So yes, we have to increase. We have to increase trust. We have to work in some other ways to instill and to aim some kind of social trust regarding how can we report and we denounce crimes. So that would be my answer. I want to give some space to Thuli to say something also.
Yes, very good. So Thuli is back with us. That's fantastic. So Thuli, before we lose you again, maybe you want to compress in 1 or 2 minutes your key messages so that the people can take them home and join us in addressing some of the questions that have been sent to you. So please, Thuli, go ahead. Try to make it quick and snappy because we may lose you anytime.
Thank you. I apologize. You won't lose me. There was a battery challenge. I charged my cell phone with my computer. It seems like the iPhone used too much power, but I apologize about that. I think in ending, the key message is we can do better in the way we treat whistleblowers. They are a gold mine in terms of the information we need to run society better, to run companies better, and particularly to run the state better. Now, in time of COVID-19, we all need to re-examine our perceptions of whistleblowers. For example, a lot of governments and company executives end up doing something bad in order to look good. So a country, for example, might want the COVID-19 statistics to look like they are less than they are. If, for example, there's procurement that has gone wrong on tenders on vaccines, you want to look good to the world. But the truth is, if you don't nip it in the bud, it grows. And also, if you treat whistleblowers badly, nobody else will want to stick their neck out in the future, which means these people that exist in our companies, in our societies, in our NGOs, and everywhere will stop helping. One of the questions was differentiating between a whistleblower and somebody who tells the truth. I think you are only a whistleblower if you bring to light that which happened in the dark. So a whistleblower would be somebody who, if they hadn't whistleblown, we wouldn't know that the reason the patient died is because there was a swab that was left inside the patient. The whistleblower would be the person who tells us that the vaccine that was procured from a wrong channel, and in the end, people might die because it's not the right vaccine. A whistleblower would be somebody who says somebody who should not have been at the front of the queue for the vaccine did get the vaccine, which undermines social justice, equality, and creates a much more angry climate. People are already on the edge because of COVID-19, because a lot of people are going through personal life quakes because of it. And anything that suggests that there's impropriety, injustice, and dishonesty undermines not just the rule of law or social justice, it also potentially undermines democracy, because people are in the edge, and any suggestion that they are being cheated is going to fuel the fire. And so that's a whistleblower. The other people that are confused with whistleblowers is what Americans call Karens. I think it's so unfair. I have so many friends that are Karens. So a Karen is a person who stands up to wrongdoing. Like the public protector would be probably a bit of a Karen, less of a whistleblower and more of a Karen. It's the person who stands up to authority and says, this far and no more, and make sure that things are done properly. But that's all I wanted to say was, let's revisit 3 areas of our systems, whether it's companies, countries, or NGOs, and see whether the law can protect whistleblowers better, whether our culture can protect them a little bit better, and lastly, we reduce the negative impact in their personal lives. Like a lot of them end up with need for money, and nobody is there to help them with the financial implications of being harassed. And a lot of them end up without jobs. Just lastly, to say the media also is playing an important role as whistleblowers. And in South Africa, they are under attack when it comes to areas of political excesses. I mean, there's a political party that has decided that certain journalists can't come to its events. The truth is, anything that happens to the public in public spaces is our business. And therefore, the media should have a right to go anywhere where human beings are going to be treated and when power is going to be exercised over human beings. So I'm just saying, you gave us statistics on journalists. Keep in your mind the fact that it won't always be government that ill-treats journalists. Political parties, companies, and private individuals may also be responsible for pushing back against journalists, because for some people, they do know that democracy dies in darkness. And therefore, we all have to ensure that whistleblowing is supported, because sunshine is the best of disinfectants.
Sorry, always happens. So, Thuli, thank you so much. Let me ask you a couple of questions. One which comes from the audience, which I think is really, really interesting. After the apartheid and after the reconciliation and redress processes in South Africa, how would you evaluate, very shortly, how would you evaluate the culture of denunciation and potentially of trust of citizens vis-a-vis the government?
I would say the culture of this denunciation of wrongdoing by government has increased over the years. I would say there was a time during apartheid when there was a culture of denunciation, but the ramifications were huge. Political parties were banned, people went to prison, and people were killed. And therefore, that had a cooling effect. Since democracy, there's more space, even though I have said we still need to protect whistleblowers better, but there's far more whistleblowing. For example, you might even think that South Africa is the most corrupt country in Africa. I don't think so. It's one country where when people see wrongdoing, they whistleblow. And the media is also very vocal in telling stories about such wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm. And the other question is one that I addressed to the panel, to both of the panelists, is pretty much about the title of this panel, about whether whistleblowing is kind of the magic wand to help and stop corruption in COVID-related issues. Do you think it's the magic wand? Yes or no, and why?
I would say yes, personally, because everything that is done by government is done in privacy, because we've given people in government the power to deal with our lives. And we won't know what happens in darkness. Everything is done on the basis of trust. And we want to believe that everyone is ethical, but not everyone is ethical or purpose-driven or even conscious of the impact of the things that they're doing. And it's only whistleblowers that will tell us the story that is not being told to us.
Very, very good. So if I got it right from our three panelists, Ángeles, Stefano, and Thuli, the three of you agree that whistleblowing was a magic wand to tell the truth against wrongdoing in COVID. Am I right on that? Yeah,
Exactly.
the three of you. But then again,
Yes, you are.
yes, I am. So we have an answer to our panel, but let's be cautious because there's too much work to do. Too much work to do in regards to spreading fair legislation on whistleblowing around the world. So far, there is only a bit more of a dozen comprehensive legislation on whistleblowers around the world, a bit more than a dozen, and around more than 50 laws that have provisions on freedom of expression that do have an implication for whistleblowing. 50 out of 190 countries around the world or something like that. So there's a long road on the institutional side. There is a long road on a cultural side to understanding what denouncing in your own sphere of work actually means, what the effects and what the challenges may be, and even a historical one about how people have related to each other within their societies, how they have been able to sort out problems, like Stefano mentioned, and how much people trust in the execution or in the performance of the institutions that are supposed to protect and defend. Like Ángeles told us, that the biggest percentages of cases that are being reported in Mexico basically go nowhere. So people think of dealing with judiciary and other entities as a complete waste of time. I think that we are reaching the very end of this panel. It's been, kind of already 1 hour and a half. Let's go back very quickly to AI Weiwei and just search interview. And let's remember that the right to question cannot be taken as a given in every context and in every country. It has to be fought and it has to be defended. And for that to happen, we need active citizens, we need informed citizens, and we need citizens who are capable of building ties of trust and communication within each other. It has been a real fantastic panel and a really good discussion. I hope that this can, inspire the conversations for the next panels, and at least we got some answers already at this very early stage. It seems to be a magic one, but what does it take to make it happen? Thank you very much, and I will now pass the voice to our hosts, and thank you for the audience, for your participations, for your patience with the technical glitches. We know how it is with the virtual world, and hope to see you again and hope to have a vibrant discussion throughout the days. My name is Roberto Perez-Rocha, and it has been my pleasure being with you. Good afternoon, good morning, goodbye.
Thank you, Roberto. And I'm jumping in also to announce the next events. First, I want to thank all of you, Roberto, Thuli, Maria, and Stefano. And also, I think it was a very important discussion. This is a great start of our conference, also specifically in trying to make clarity among the definition of whistleblowers, of truth tellers, and what they also mean. And I also feel, by being Italian, that I want to mention a bit the work of some organizations in Italy that are really specifically working on whistleblowing. So there are people that are doing an important work also in Italy, for example, the Good Lobby, Global Leaks, and also on Transparency International Italy. So I would say perhaps this could also be a good occasion for the people of Noi Denunceremo to get in contact with them, to try also to understand how to deal specifically in case they would get in contact with the whistleblowers that are not the same of truth tellers. And also, thank you, Stefano, for mentioning WikiLeaks. I wanted to say that we will have a panel also related to the situation of Julian Assange, that also, to be clear, is not a whistleblower, is a journalist that has also been in contact with whistleblowers. So we have to be very specific with that, because it's also a matter of legal support and whistleblowing protection and a lot of difficult issues. And actually, we will speak also about this in a panel on Saturday morning from 11 to 1, in which we will actually mention the situation of Julian Assange and the persecution of him that is also treated with the same Espionage Act that is often what the whistleblowers are convicted with. So that is a very complex discussion, and I invite you to be part of it on Saturday. And at the same time, I also want to remind you that if you want to watch the film Coronation from AI Weiwei, you could have the possibility to watch it for free in Germany from today until Sunday. So you just need to go to our website and do the procedure there and then access to the film. Unfortunately, we could only do this for the people in Germany, but I mean, we are happy that this was possible, and also was wonderful to have this interview with AI Weiwei here at our event. And now I also want to announce what will happen after. We will come back here at 6:30 Central Europe time, so Berlin time, with the keynote called Whistleblowing and COVID-19, telling the truth at the center of crisis, in which we will actually have two whistleblowers speaking, Erika Chang, Theranos whistleblower, and also the executive director of Ethics in Entrepreneurship, and also Eileen Chubb, that was also a whistleblower in the care industry, and is the founder of Compassion in Care, and also co-founded the Whistler. The panel is moderated by Delphine Halgan, that is the director of the Signal Network. They also work on whistleblowing protection. So we will go on speaking about whistleblowing and trying also to make clarity of the current pandemic situation through people that have experienced the situation at the moment. So thank you so much to all of you, all the great speakers that we had today at a global level. Thank you, Roberto, for your moderation, and thank all the team of the Disruption Network Lab for this great work. And see you again at 6:30, and goodbye for today. See you later.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.